If I now shift to the closure of Nord Stream 1, which is, as you rightly said, that big gas pipeline, which particularly Germany and Italy was so dependent on. This has been coming for some time. This is not new. There's just been a sort of waiting for the excuse from Russia to say, right, well, we're just going to shut it down altogether.
Gas and oil supplies are continuing to be weaponized over the war in Ukraine. Last night, Russian gas company Gazprom announced they would not resume supplies to Europe after apparently discovering a fault in the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. The move came hours after G7 ministers agreed to impose a price cap on Russian oil, with the EU suggesting that Russia is acting in retaliation. Nord Stream 1 is the single biggest pipeline for gas from Russia to Europe, and an indefinite shutdown will push prices up even further. Angela Knight joins us, former Chief Executive of Energy UK. Angela, good morning.
Good morning.
So crucially then, we are considering these two things alongside each other, aren't we? And so in terms of the impact, what impact could the G7 price cap have when it's up in the face of Russia keeping the pipeline closed down? What impact does that have on us as consumers?
Well, the G7 decision is all about trying to reduce the amount of money that goes to Russia for its oil. And I think what is going to happen is that we'll find that we'll just be buying our oil from elsewhere, because Russia will say, well, if that's what you're doing, I'm not prepared to sell you the oil. But it does put some constraint on Russia, and it is actually just simply a continuation of the sorts of actions that we've been taking as Western countries for the purposes of registering both concerns and trying to get Russia to withdraw from its invasion of Ukraine. If I now shift to the closure of Nord Stream 1, which is, as you rightly said, that big gas pipeline, which particularly Germany and Italy was so dependent on. This has been coming for some time. This is not new. There's just been a sort of waiting for the excuse from Russia to say, right, well, we're just going to shut it down altogether. And that's one of the reasons why there's been this huge race at almost any price to fill up European gas storage. And Germany, as you probably know, also announced yesterday that it was nearly 90% full on its gas storage. So whilst I quite agree that these are pretty strong statements that both the G7 has made, because this, of course, is countries that are outside Europe and not just Europe, and it's also a pretty strong statement that Russia has made, which says well, no more gas. Both of these decisions were actually expected. On what it will do for us on price, actually gas prices are starting to come down at the moment. And that is partly because storage is full. It is partly because lots of other actions have been taken. It is partly because we've turned round where we get our gas supplies of. That is, Europe has turned around where it gets its gas supplies from and has been putting much more in on tankers, the so-called LNG or liquefied natural gas. We can't know at this stage what is going to happen with winter, but the reality of pulling gas in from lots of other countries, and indeed the edict in many European countries to say reduce by 15% your consumption, and that is going through initially public buildings and all those sorts of areas, has started to put in place a better plan for how we all get through this winter than was the case 2, 3, 4 months ago.
Understood. Thank you for that clarity. That's so helpful. I do just wonder on the G7 price cap, as we consider the impact on us as consumers and on European countries who, in terms of this restraint on Russia, I just wonder if actually it can be effective without the involvement of, for example, India, a kind of neutral oil importing country, or indeed Russia just finding new markets for its oil. So is the G7 price cap all well and good, but actually it's going to be limited in its success?
Oh, that is correct. That is correct. It will be limited because there are many countries who are not taking the sanctions against Russia. It is, of course, pretty hand in glove with China these days. As you rightly point out, India sees itself as neutral. Turkey isn't involved either. So there are quite a lot of other countries, and it will be selling elsewhere rather than selling to Europe. It does selling to the G7. And a part of the G7, of course, is the US, and the US is self sufficient from energy. So it's more about making a point. It's more about saying we, as these countries, are no longer prepared to pay the higher prices to Russia, which in turn is helping fueling your war. So there will be some effect to them, there will be some impact on ourselves, but it is more about firming up some public statements and, if you like, closing one or two doors in the wall rather than it going to be a huge impact on Russia. But it is a strong point.
Yeah, and does it speak to the real power imbalance? And by that I mean the kind of, the political power imbalance here, because moves like the G7 price cap take time. There's some suggestion that it might not even be introduced until December, for example. Whereas, from Putin's point of view, he has really quite instant and quite damaging, I suppose, levers at his disposal that he can pull pretty quickly.
Yes, he has. He's actually playing the economic war extremely well. He's playing the psychological war extremely well. We have been panicking as a country. Europe has been panicking as well. And it's not surprising, and I'm not critical of it. I'm just saying that actually, over the last, let's say 20, 25 years, there's been a view about energy policy which has resulted in a lot of dependencies from external countries, and they're not all that friendly. Now, I'm a great believer in international trade, and I don't think that we should be insular. I do believe that we need more energy security, and I do believe that we need more security on our food, and we have to get there. I think what has happened is that we've been too far away from that personal security, that country security, and too far in to dependencies which were long distance, semi-hostile, potentially hostile, and that there's been too much of an eye closed to the consequences because the supply was cheap and plentiful and reasonably local. So yes, we've had our energy policy wrong for a long, long time. It's a really nasty shock that we've had. We can get through this winter. It's going to be difficult, it's going to be pricey, and there's going to have to be some assistance given to various groups of people and some assistance into industry. At the same time, there's a huge ability to reset a lot of our strategies and our policies and do that quickly so we get some more back of that sufficiency, and that will be helpful not only in the short term, but actually in the medium and long term as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your insight, Angela. Good to speak to you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's Angela Knight, former Chief Executive of Energy UK.